Our first speaker is Mr. Satyaki Raghunath, former COO of Bangalore International Airport. He will walk us through the making of Kempegowda International Airport, a benchmark in aviation infrastructure, sustainability, and passenger experience.
Morning, everyone. I think it's quite intimidating to be in front of this audience after so many years. And before I start, I just wanted to say it's a homecoming of sorts for me. I first came to Gujarat in 1993 to write an entrance exam here at CEPT. And, it just shows you how old I am. And, I remember being one of those nervous students writing the entrance exam here. And then I spent the 5 best years of my life here in Gujarat. I was in Vallabh doing architecture. And I have very fond memories of being on this campus, coming here for crits. I remember I was telling Bimal that he used to come for some of the crits at that point. I remember your dad, when I came here and listened to him, Mr. Doshi. And I think being back at CEPT is a wonderful experience, because as students, all of us sort of looked up to CEPT, looked up to Gujarat, looked up to Ahmedabad as sort of the most forward-thinking place as far as education and higher learning was concerned in India. And I think it's continued to sort of remain the beacon as far as India is concerned in terms of institutional activity, in terms of creative thinking, in terms of what it has done to shape modern India. So certainly feels wonderful to be back here. I think, 𝗏𝗏𝗏, thank you for inviting me and for doing the case study on Bangalore Airport. 𝗏𝗏𝗏 and I used to work together many years ago. Charu and I used to work together for a long time, many years ago. And I spotted my undergraduate thesis guide, Dr. Srivatsan also, who is here, who I've met after 25 years. So, it's just wonderful to be back amongst all these stalwarts. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the story of Kempegowda International Airport. I won't take too much of your time, and I just want to sort of leave you with a few snippets as to what happened over the years and what we thought about and how the story came to be. And then I'm happy to take questions after that, after Malai also finishes and whenever the session is. So, this is, as you all know, Kempegowda International Airport. And we sort of think about it as a new gateway to India. And I say this because, traditionally, Delhi and Bombay have been the gateways to India, internationally, in terms of how you think about access into this country, in terms of airlines coming in, etc. And at least when I was growing up, I don't know how many of you remember, and I don't know how many of you remember the old HAL airport in Bangalore. I mean, it was not even an airport. I mean, it was just a small little airstrip, almost. They extended the runway. HAL, which is India's pioneering aerospace company, one of India's pioneering aerospace companies, had a runway. They happened to have an airport, which they operated at certain times. So clearly, as the city started booming in the 90s and the tech revolution started, it was pretty apparent that the city needed a new airport, it needed new infrastructure. And the story of Kempegowda International Airport was born through the efforts of a number of people, number of eminent Bangaloreans, number of civil servants, number of politicians, number of other people from other parts of India who sort of recognized the need for the fact that India needed world-class modern infrastructure. And I think it's wonderful to be here today because it's a very important theme. When we talk about Viksit Bharat, when we talk about the Prime Minister's vision, when we talk about Make in India, when we talk about what India is going to be when we celebrate 100 years of independence, I think the key driver is going to be world-class infrastructure. Because world-class infrastructure does multiple things, right? It improves our cities. It stands out as a beacon and as a hope in terms of a sense of civic pride. It gives citizens something to aspire towards. And at the end of the day, it also significantly improves the economy, because what it does is it adds significant heft to economic growth and GDP. And by providing that world-class infrastructure, whether it's passenger terminals or ports or cargo terminals and things like that, you're changing the way India behaves, you're changing the way India performs. And it completely changes the story in terms of what we can be. Because for many years, I think we had very poor role models. And it's very important to have great role models. And I think today's India has great role models. And I think we've got to make sure that we continue to deliver that world-class infrastructure, because for all of you, who many of you seem very, very young at the beginning of your careers, I think the idea of having great role models and aspiring to do world-class things is very, very important. And I think I say this, I mean, I speak at a number of conferences and I do this quite often. But I think the most important thing for India is to have great role models and make sure that you deliver to world-class standards, because that is the thing that has been lacking in this country for the first 50, 60 years since independence. And I think now we have a chance to deliver that world-class infrastructure. So this airport was born out of that hope. And between 1990 and 2004, there were multiple attempts to sort of deliver a new airport in Bangalore. So Singapore Airlines tried, Tata's tried with Singapore Airlines, Mr. Narayan Murthy tried. And I think out of an amalgam of all of those efforts, finally an arrangement and a concession agreement was sort of developed. And in 2004, along with Hyderabad, these were the first two PPP projects in India on the airport side. So in 2004, the agreement was signed. Zurich Airport, as many of you might remember, along with L&T and Siemens, were the principal promoters of the airport in Bangalore. And the agreement was signed in 2004. The first flight landed or took off on May 24th, 2008. So it took 4 years to deliver that project. And I don't think at that point any of us, and I was involved in the latter stages of delivery in 2006-07 during this project with Zurich Airport. And at that point, I don't think any of us envisaged that it would grow this quickly and it would become what it has become today. And I say this now because what you see here is what we've tried to do over the last 10 years. So I spent the first 10, 12 years as a consultant to Bangalore Airport. I mean, I used to live abroad and I used to come in and do a lot of work with them. And then I joined Bangalore Airport in 2018, just when Fairfax had bought the stake from GVK. And over the last sort of 7, 8 years, what we've tried to do is develop world-class infrastructure, which GVK and Zurich had started. So, you know, to be fair, I think they had delivered a piece of fantastic infrastructure before, and we had great foundations to build on. And I think that's what we've tried to do over the course of the last 7 or 8 years. So the idea was to create experiences like never before. And I think, again, it's very important because most of us think of airports, or traditionally we thought of airports as a place to go to take a flight or to sort of land, right? And I think it still fulfills that principal purpose. I mean, I often tell young people, I do inductions for young people regularly at the airport. And I always tell them that the only value an airport has, I mean, I'm sort of quite cynical and old-fashioned in some ways. The only value an airport typically has is the runway. Without the runway, it would just be another 4,000 acres of land. I mean, this is a 4,000-acre campus. And the 4,000 acres have no value whatsoever if we didn't have the 2 runways. So at an airport, the principal sort of driver are the runways. But having said that, I think the onus is on us to also create those experiences, not just deliver physical infrastructure, but create experiences and make sure people really have a great time as they go through it. Because most of us, and you will remember this when you go through an airport or a station or a port or whatever it is, people hate being in queues, right? And I think the thing that most people hate about any of these processes is the fact that you're in a queue. And the idea is to make that experience as nice as possible. So when we thought about this and we were thinking about what we needed to do with the airport, we wanted to reimagine the concept of airports. And I think we've been fortunate in India over the last 15 years that we've got great examples to sort of take from. So whether it's Delhi's Terminal 3, whether it's Mumbai's Terminal 2, whether now sort of the first and second terminals at Bangalore, Navi Mumbai Airport, and I think all of the other projects that have come since, I mean, Mopa in Goa, I think all of the promoters, all of the operators have delivered world-class examples of infrastructure. And as Surenbhai, you said in your opening remarks, it's never easy. It's a huge challenge. There are multiple stakeholders, private sector, public sector, etc. And I think in the case of Bangalore Airport, what is very important also is that we are pretty unique in the fact that, I mean, we're a public-private partnership like all other airports in India. But the chairperson of the board of Bangalore Airport is the chief secretary of the government of Karnataka at any given time. So we have a very strong sort of input from the local state government. So GOK plays a very, very significant role. And over the last 7.5 years, I have to say that it's been a privilege to work with GOK because the quality of the bureaucrats, the way they think about infrastructure, the way they think about Bangalore, the level of pride that they have in what the airport represents in the city is something that really has to be seen to be believed. And we've had a great partnership working with them in order to deliver this infrastructure. So by the time, at the end of last fiscal year, we had catered to 42 million passengers and about 500,000 metric tons of cargo. We were the only airport in India besides Delhi to have 2 independent parallel runways. And that's a very big thing in terms of airport capacity at any major airport, right? And just to put that in context, when Zurich thought of the airport first, the two-runway airport on the 4,000-acre campus, the saturation capacity that was predicted at the end of the concession period, which was a 30 plus 30-year concession, was 45 million. So they thought they will reach 45 million traffic in about 60 years, right? And if COVID hadn't happened, we would have hit 45 million probably in 2021 or 22. We happened to hit it this year because there was sort of a pause when COVID happened for 2 or 3 years, so the traffic sort of slowed down, and then it sort of had to pick up all over again. So this is sort of the status, and this is the growth. And this is Bangalore, but this could be it's just it's an example of India. So, Bangalore just happens to be the case in point here. But what you see here is effectively what we are saying is traffic is going to triple. Between 2018, when I started there, when the traffic was about 26 million passengers, to, let's say, by the early to mid-2030s, you're going to have 80 plus million passengers at this airport. And to put that in context, that is the size of Dubai or London Heathrow on a two-runway system, which means that Bangalore is an example, but you're going to have the same level of growth in Delhi or Bombay or Hyderabad or any major Indian urban agglomeration. Because, again, there has been a huge explosion in terms of what India is. People want to travel. India is actually effectively an outbound travel market, so it's not even just about domestic travel anymore. It's about what is happening with international travel and how many Indians are seeking to travel abroad. And today, people are upwardly mobile. I think the younger generation is less focused on sort of, buying houses and buying cars and sort of buying assets. And I think everybody is thinking about experiences. And I think more and more people want to travel. After COVID, it became painfully evident also that you can't predict what's going to happen. So everybody wants to go out and have these experiences and see the world, which I think is a great thing. I spent 16 years outside India, and I think travel was the greatest education of my life. And I strongly urge everybody in this audience to try and travel as much as possible and see the world, because you learn so much from traveling. You learn so much from different cultures and from meeting people from all over the world that it will reshape the way you think. It will also change the way you view life, right? So that's going to happen, and we know that. So in order to cater to this growth, what do we need to do? And this is sort of an example, and some of you in the audience might recognize this, but that was the first master plan. So you can see what it was. Two-runway system, they had a saturation capacity pegged at that point at 45 million. Then sort of we recast a master plan in 2010-11. I was at that point the project director for the consulting company that did this master plan. At that point, the saturation capacity was pegged at 65 million. So we thought traffic will grow faster. It might be 65 million in the long term. Then when I joined Bangalore Airport, we thought it'll be about 90 million. We redid the master plan again. This was just before COVID, right? And I'm just saying this because fundamentally you can see that shift in terms sort of scale. You can see the movement in terms of the fact that it's 45, 65, 90. And then we invested all this. We invested about $2 billion in delivering a second runway, the first phase of Terminal 2, a multimodal transportation hub, which we're waiting for the metro to come in. So the building is mostly ready. We're waiting for Bangalore Metro to bring the train tracks in, the rolling stock in. The utilities, the roads, the connectivity, and a number of other projects from a utilities perspective and from a support function perspective, which actually are the most important things in an airport. Nobody talks about them because the passengers only see the terminals. So the sort of the glamorous or the sexy part, right, is the passenger terminal. But everything else which underpins everything that we do is the utilities, the support, the access corridors, how things get in and out, so on and so forth. And finally, those become the biggest constraints in terms of the growth or the development of a large piece of infrastructure. And what we've done over the last 7 or 8 years, therefore, is invest in that first $2 billion, and I will tell you a little bit more about that, operational and digital transformation, and the airport city development. I'm not going to focus a lot on the last two parts today. I'm just going to focus on the first part to the extent possible. But I'm happy to sort of take questions after that to talk about what it is. This was Terminal 2. I think the Honorable Prime Minister inaugurated this in November 2022. Operations started in January 23. And just as a show of hands, how many people have been through this terminal? Just out of curiosity. Okay, maybe about 25, 30, 20% maybe. I'd urge you all to go and visit most of this the terminal, but not just this, but all the infrastructure that's being built in India, because I think as students, you should go and travel and see these projects. It's very important for you guys to experience it and to understand what's being delivered, because it's one thing to see it in a picture or on a drawing or on a plan, and another thing to experience it in terms of understand the space, understand how people move through it, how passengers and goods flow through all of these areas, right? So this is the check-in hall. This was probably taken just after inauguration, before operation started, because it's never like this, right? I mean, there are people everywhere. It's really crowded, and it's never like this. But it just gives you an idea of what it was. And I think it's important, if you look at this, the first thing that you will understand is it was built around 4 key themes. And it's important to talk about those themes. The first part was, I think, when I was growing up, Bangalore was known as a garden city. All of you might remember that. It was called the Garden City. It was actually the retirement capital of India. Old people came there to retire in the 80s. And, nobody ever thought of Bangalore as this tech hub, IT hub, etc. All that happened post-1990. So Bangalore was the Garden City. So the idea was, how do you reflect that theme of the Garden City in the terminal? So the idea was, can we get a terminal in a garden? And not a garden in the terminal, but ideally, can we site the terminal itself in a garden? The second theme was, Bangalore also is known as a tech capital of India, or the Silicon Valley of India. So how do you make technology something that everything revolves around? A third aspect was thinking about the environmental and sustainability related impacts of a piece of infrastructure that was this elaborate and large. And finally, we needed something that reflected the ethos, the sense of place, the art and culture of a city, that reflects the aspirations of the local population, that talks about what it means, that then generates enough for people to feel proud about that bit of infrastructure. And those were the 4 themes around which the terminal was designed. SOM, who were the architects, did a fantastic job. I think we had a great time working with them on this, and it evolved over time. These are some of the images. Again, I mean, these have been taken without the people in there. I think I need to find images with people in there so that you get an idea of how busy it is these days. But this is examples of or snapshots of different parts of the terminal. What has it done since then? It's built around about 255,000 square meters. And by the way, this is just half the terminal. So we built only half. I will come to that next. But effectively, it's half the terminal. It's got 90 check-in counters. It's got, a number of, it's got 22 contact stands between the northern side and the eastern side in the first phase of development. It has 1,200 plus parking spots. It's got, several. It's got, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 36 departure immigration positions. It's got 64 arriving immigration positions. And it's got 2 CODEF stands, which means that 2 A380s can park simultaneously at the airport, right, at the terminal. And this is we'll spend some time on this. This gives you an idea of what the airport and the new master plan is talking about. You've got 2 runways. I don't know if there's a pointer here. The north runway was the first runway that was developed there, which is number 1. Number 3 is the Terminal 1, which was the first terminal that was developed between 2004 and 8. In fact, the first part of that was just a little rectangular box here, for those of you who might remember. And then there was a 3-bay extension to the west, a 3-bay extension to the east, and a pier that went out. Number 2 is a south runway that was opened in December 2018. And along with this south runway, Along with the south runway, we also opened the Eastern Cross Taxiway, which allows planes to connect between the 2 runways and allows them to taxi across. Number 4 is the first part of Terminal 2. So what we've built so far is this northern piece that you see here, this box, that the northern half, the northern pier and part of the eastern pier. And in January of 2026, construction is going to start on the southern half of Terminal 2 and the pier that goes out here on the south, and there's then going to be potentially a slight kink and then further contact stands here. So we are doubling the capacity effectively of Terminal 2. It will go from being about 255,000 square meters and about 25 million passengers to about further 270,000 square meters of floor area and an additional 20 to 25 million in capacity. So once that's complete, we will have 2 terminals capable of handling about 80 million passengers. And that seems like a lot, but I think we will not even be able to stop. I mean, we'll barely pause to catch some breath. And then we will deliver Terminal 3, which is on the eastern side here. If you can see number 6 on the eastern side. That will be developed and delivered in the early 2030s because that will be required for traffic beyond 80 million. And the reason that went on the eastern side goes back to the point that I made on access. So today we have one main access road coming through here. There's a south secondary access road, but effectively all of the access is from the western side. And it significantly limits what we can do because there's very little capacity beyond a certain point. There's also not enough resilience if something happens, which means that the airport will be shut down and we will require access from the east. So what we've been working with the Karnataka government on is a tunnel that comes through here. There's an access corridor and a tunnel that's going to come through here, have an interchange and go up into the terminal. So effectively, you have access from both the west and the east sides. And to go beyond 80 million, the issue is not so much of runway capacity or terminal capacity, but the issue is landside capacity. We will be gridlocked on the west. Also because all the traffic today is coming from Hebbal, for those of you who know Bangalore. It's one road which comes from the city. So if that road or something happens to that corridor, again, there's a limitation in terms of how we can access the airport. So we need a separate access from the east, so the eastern access will come through and there will be a terminal on the east side effectively. We've got cargo facilities and support functions out here. We've got some of this also going on further with additional aviation support functions, including a fuel farm. There's a big Indigo MRO campus here. There's a further 40 acres of Indigo MRO campus coming up here. And here on the southeast side, there's going to be a very large Air India and Tata campus coming up for a big base for their A320s, A350s, and 777s. So this is going to be roughly about 60 acres of MRO space that's coming up there. When we deliver this runway, we also now are delivering a western cross taxiway. So what we will have is effective circulation around the airfield. And at most major airports around the world, you need that circulation because what you need to do is minimize taxi times, which means the amount of time an aircraft takes either to get to a runway and to take off, or once it lands to get to a parking position. And we need this because it allows for actually as little head-to-head interaction between taxiing aircraft as possible. So we need the ability to be able to move aircraft quickly around the airfield. And at an airport, the biggest planning constraint is actually not the movement of people. I mean, we will deliver terminals, even if we are constrained, we will deliver solutions. It may not be the most elegant solution, but it will still work as far as people and cargo are concerned. I mean, to some extent. The thing that is, or the aspect that we cannot control is the movement of aircraft, because aircraft are designed in a certain way. They're governed by very specific rules as far as FAA, ICAO, DGCA, etc. are concerned in terms of maneuvering and parking and sort of the way they have to access positions. And all of that means that the maximum flexibility and resilience has to be provided on the airfield in order to allow for free flow of aircraft around the airside. So this is sort of where we are. Number 9 is the multimodal transport hub. So the metro is coming in through here, below the cross taxiway down this side, through the central position here and into the metro station here. So there's a large metro station here. We've got a forecourt development in front of T1 here called the Quad. We've got a second forecourt development here in front of T2 called the T2 Quad. So these are some of the projects that we are starting off now into 2025-26. Over the next 5 years, we will deliver all of this. So this is a further $2.2 billion of investment within Bangalore Airport to take capacity up to about 80 million passengers and to take cargo capacity from about 500,000. I mean, today we have about 750 to 800,000 metric tons of capacity. It will take the capacity to over 1 million metric tons. So by 2030, we will have capacity there for about 80 million passengers and over 1 million metric tons of cargo. So what else? We talked about being a destination, we talked about experiences. And the idea is not just to focus on the physical infrastructure, but to think about creating memories, delivering that feeling of wow through what you're doing in terms of soft infrastructure, in terms of training, in terms of hospitality, building a brand, which is something that we focused on also over the course of the last few years, looking at being an example in terms of how do you think about yourself as being a beacon of hope from the principles of sustainability, community, etc. And finally, crafting and making sure that we do more with respect to sense of place. So in doing that, we've sort of started moving into some of our lounge experiences, trying to think about what we can do to redefine what lounges can be. We operate our own lounges. This is something that we've started doing over the course of the last 2 years. This is called the 080 brand. And I think for those of you who are of my vintage or older, you will all remember that the STD code for Bangalore was 080. So that's what the inspiration for this brand was. It was sort of, how can you think of something that was unique, that reflects sense of Bangalore, and something that we can think about. And then we became the first and only airport so far in India to get the 5-star rating. Terminal 2 was rated 5-star by Skytrax earlier this year. Terminal 1 is rated 4-star. We've got to do a number of improvements. We're doing a refurbishment project right now, which completely guts out the baggage systems and refurbishes the utilities and baggage systems. And we will increase capacity in Terminal 1 to about 35-36 million. So between the two terminals, once T1 is refurbished and T2 is delivered, we will have about 80 million in capacity. I already spoke about this, so a lot of cargo projects are also ongoing in terms of delivering that, again, world-class infrastructure. We are the biggest and best, the largest airport for perishables in India. We're by far the largest airport in South India from a cargo processing and cargo traffic perspective. And we have the largest cargo processing capacity in South and Central India in terms of overall cargo tonnage. We also thought of something called bytes, not bricks. So when COVID happened, right, we also had to think about how do we save money, because we had no idea what was coming out. In 2020, nobody knew what the future was going to hold and how much infrastructure you had to deliver, whether you had the money for it, whether people were going to ever travel again, how long it was going to last, so on and so forth. So just before COVID, we had sort of started thinking about digital infrastructure and transformation. And this was sort of a catchy sentence that we came up with, bytes, not bricks, in terms of trying to think about what we can do with digital infrastructure in order to make sure that we can improve operational efficiency, enhance customer experience, and also think about new ways of generating revenue. Because at the end of the day, I think for some of you might be aware, but we are a regulated monopoly. So our airports all airports in India with over 3.5 million passengers in traffic are regulated by the Airport Economic Development Regulatory Authority. And AERA sets tariff, and AERA sort of figures out what you need to do in order to recover your investment. So we were also trying to think what we can do in order to generate additional sources of revenue, improve infrastructure and efficiency, and not spend as much from a capital perspective. So we've spent the last 5 years developing a number of core platforms, trying to think about new experiences, automate processes, and I don't know how many of you are aware of DigiYatra? How many people here are on DigiYatra? Okay, great. So DigiYatra came out of the Bangalore Airport Innovation Lab. So it was originally an idea that we were thinking about when T2 was being conceptualized. And, I don't know whether all of you remember, but you had to have your boarding pass stamped about 10 different times when you went through an airport. I mean, 10 is an exaggeration, but you had to get it stamped fundamentally at so many places, which was very, very painful and horrible customer experience. So we were trying to think about what can you do to change that. So the central principle of that was your face is your boarding pass. Right? And the idea was, if you're able to register once with your face as an ID, you should be able to go through any part of the airport or eventually any part of the transportation ecosystem with just your face registered or an ID registered. So let's say you have a DigiYatra ID. In the longer term, strictly speaking, even Indian Railways should be able to use it, or a busing system should be able to use it, or any hotel should be able to use it, where if you logged in, if you connected to DigiYatra platform, they don't need you to provide an ID at every point. So today when you go to a train or when you check in at a hotel, in every place you need an ID. Everybody asks you for a physical ID, you have to whip out a card, so on and so forth. But if you think about it, in today's world, in any case, I know privacy is important. It is very important. But the truth is, everybody already knows what you're doing, right? If you talk to your friend, or if you're talking to your wife or your children or whatever it is at any point about Goa, for instance, today on a holiday, in the next 10 minutes, your Instagram account is feeding you sort of everything about Goa, right? I mean, all of you have seen it. So this whole thing about privacy, while it's the most important thing, but it's a myth, right? Your phone is listening to you. Everybody is listening to you. So I think you got to figure out how to use technology in better ways to do this, right? From a sustainability perspective, I think once again, we wanted to be amongst the most sustainable airports in the world. Today, we are powered 100% by renewable energy for the last 3.5 years. So it's a combination of solar and wind. We are also the first airport to be, in India to get level 5 accreditation from ACI in terms of sustainability. We've also we are in the process of getting level 5 accreditation for customer experience. And we've got a water positivity index of 2.36, which means that for every liter of water consumed, 2.36 liters of water today are, stored at the airport through rainwater runoff and through the tanks and ponds at the airport, which we can use for a number of purposes across the airport except for drinking. And then the airport city. So these are a number of projects that are coming across, over 400-acre parcels, 400 acres of land at the airport. Multiple hotels, office complexes, a world-class convention and exhibition center, which will be ready in a few years. And there's a concert arena also, which is currently in the stages of development and is expected to be live next year. So these are some of the projects that are coming up from an airport city perspective. It's been slower, also because we are 35 kilometers north of the city. I think initially everybody thought that it would be much faster, but the point is you get freehold land right outside the airport at much cheaper rates. So in order to develop leasehold land and to deliver an airport city is not the easiest thing. But these are very interesting projects, and I think the good part is over the last 3 or 4 years there's been a lot of momentum. We've sort of kicked off many of these things, and they will sort of get delivered. So in summary, I think, all of these things, I don't want to reiterate, but effectively, we did a lot of things that were different. And I think the secret sauce at Bangalore was 3 things. The first thing was there was a pioneering spirit. There was a spirit of innovation. And I think that was very, very important. It's very important in any organization. The fact that you should be able to think differently, think creatively, try to challenge status quo, try to do things differently. And I think it's very important for everybody. The second thing is that you have to set yourself global standards. You've got to want to be the best in the world. You've got to want to be the best at what you do. And you have to have that sort of aspiration. Without that, you can't say, I want to reach for the skies. And today's India needs to reach for the skies. I mean, if you look at, many of you go to China. I mean, we keep comparing ourselves to China. There's absolutely no comparison. We are nowhere close. And anybody who's telling you that we are close to China, I mean, you've got to go to China and see it to believe what China is and what India is. So if you want to compete, if you want to be world-class, you've got to first admit that you've got to set world-class standards and deliver to those standards. And you want to be the best in the world, right? And whether it's efficiency, financial excellence, whether it's sustainability, any of these things. We're also I think as far as I know, we were the first airport to be AAA rated also in terms of, from the financing and rating agencies, which means that borrowing costs become much better, and that's a benefit to passengers because overall, when the cost of debt goes down, at the end of the day, your repayment costs also go down, and that benefit is passed on to passengers through ERA's rate-setting mechanism. And sensitivity, I think that's something that, again, in India, we have the ethos of hospitality. I think that institutionalized sensitivity, I mean, this is something that we take for granted, but when you go abroad, you see it even more. We take hospitality for granted. We take world-class standards for granted. So when you come to, anywhere across Asia, Middle East, South Asia, all the way across to the Far East, I think you figure out that hospitality is ingrained into our DNA. And we have this sense of, how can we serve our customers, serve our passengers better? And it's not something that you see in Europe, in North America, in Australia, etc., because I think they have a very different perspective of what it is to serve. And I think this is something that is there, that institutionalized sensitivity. And I've seen this in our staff, because everybody takes so much pride in terms of making sure that the passengers are happy or a problem is solved, etc. And that's true of all Indian airports. I mean, I'm saying it about Bangalore, but it could be just as well about sort of Bombay or Delhi or literally any one of our institutions. And finally, I think the ability to deliver that infrastructure to time, to budget, and making sure it's done in a way that people of the city and people of that region feel a great sense of pride. So today, I don't say Namma Airport, which in Kannada means our airport. I say Nimma Airport, which means it's your airport. So and if you go and talk to 1,500 people who are BIAL staff, or if you go and talk to, 1,800 people who are BIAL staff now, or if you go and talk to 30,000 people who work at the airport, every single one of them, or at least a large proportion, over 95% of them, truly believe that this reflects something that is world-class. This is something that they take pride in. And I think that is very important in any city. So if you think about, yesterday I landed at Ahmedabad Airport and it looked fantastic. It looked so different from the Ahmedabad Airport that I knew when I was sort of here, right? But you have to take pride. You have to deliver to world-class standards. And I think sort of forums such as this, where you're bringing together professionals, where you're bringing young people, practicing professionals, and people who are teaching to underscore and reiterate the importance of delivering world-class standards in this country are very, very important. So once again, thank you for having me here. It's been a pleasure and a privilege, and hopefully all of you enjoyed it. And I'd be happy to take questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.